It was a beautiful Monday morning. The warm spring sun was shedding golden light on the city streets. Passers-by were hurrying about their business, so there was no crowd of people at the pastry shop yet. Vivian, the overweight saleswoman who was wearing a lot of makeup, was bored, sipping coffee from a plastic cup and counting yesterday's earnings. Then an elderly woman approached the pastry shop. She was about 70 years old, wearing an old shapeless dress and a raincoat that had gone out of fashion a century ago. Her shoes were stubby, and her handbag looked ridiculous with its cracked handles. The poorly dressed woman looked at the pastries and the price tags and counted the coins in her palm. The poorly dressed woman then approached and begged, "Good morning. Excuse me, please. I wanted to buy bread, but I'm a little short of money. Could you please sell it to me at a cheaper price, and I'll bring the rest of the money tomorrow? I'm so hungry." "Don't worry, I really will bring the rest of the money tomorrow. Don't doubt it." Vivian grimaced. She was so sick of those pathetic beggars always trying to get something for free. She barked angrily, "I'm not a millionaire either, and I'm not going to pay for everyone out of my own pocket. Woman, get out of here and don't bother me. I'm not going to sell you anything." Then, a very impressive lady, a businesswoman in her 40s, got out of a fancy car. Her name was Eileen. She always bought the most expensive and freshly baked goods at this shop. She was a very profitable customer. The saleswoman immediately smiled at her and was ready to serve her to the highest standards. The rich woman was talking to someone on the phone. "Yes, Martin, let's discuss everything about the order on the conference call. It's not convenient for me to talk right now. Prepare all the information." "Yes, in 2 hours." "Okay, and please connect me with Gordon. We need to discuss a couple of things." While the lady was talking over the phone, the saleswoman began to literally chase the poor old lady away, telling her not to expect anything here. The saleswoman was sure that the rich customer would be frightened of this old beggar. Eileen involuntarily admired this gorgeous lady. She was dressed in very expensive and stylish clothes, a beige cashmere coat, suede boots, and a bag from a very expensive brand. She had flawless, light makeup on her face, and her shoulder-length hair was shimmering in the sun. The seller enviously thought, "Lucky people. I'll never live like this." Eileen took a glance at the old woman during the conversation. Just an ordinary poor granny, obviously in need of money, nothing special. The only thing that surprised her was an unusual pendant on the stranger's neck, a drop-shaped pendant of warm, sunny color made of real amber. The chain had an unusual weave, the kind you rarely see anywhere. "I've seen it somewhere before," Eileen thought casually, but this idea slipped away from her as she talked over the phone. The woman approached the pastry shop and politely said, "Hello, good morning, Vivian. Can I get a French baguette as usual, 3 vanilla cinnamon buns, and a couple of croissants with sweet cream for the girls, please?" The saleswoman immediately handed it all to her, saying, "Good morning. Here, I've already packed everything. I remember your preferences. Bon appetit. Everything is fresh as always." Eileen smiled, handed the seller a banknote, put the pastries in a bag, and started to walk away from the shop. Suddenly, the saleswoman called out to her, "Wait. You forgot to get your change." But the woman only replied, "No need for change, just sell that granny some bread, please. I think she is really hungry. Have a nice day." The saleswoman waited until the rich woman's car disappeared around the corner, then packed the cheapest loaf of bread and called the old woman, who was standing nearby timidly stomping on the spot. "Here, that rich woman paid for you. But please leave now. Have a good day." The old woman thanked everyone. "Thank you very much. There are still kind-hearted people in the world." The seller carefully put the rest of the money in her purse. "That's enough for this beggar, but I have children. I need to feed them." Eileen arrived home. She had just returned from a business trip, and her 19-year-old daughter ran out to meet her. Kay immediately hugged her mother. "Hi, Mommy. I missed you so much. I smell cinnamon. Did you get my favorite buns?" How was your trip? Eileen kissed her daughter. I missed you too, sweetie. Why aren't you at the university? I only came to take a shower and change my outfit, and then I have to go to the office. I have a lot of things to do. The girl replied sadly, Today, classes start later, but it's always like that. You just got home, and you already have to go to work. The girl replied sadly again, At least eat something. I'll warm up some soup and make you some coffee. I know you'll be hungry all day again. Eileen smiled. Thank you for your care, sunshine. Please make sure you keep one of the buns for Grandma Molly. By the way, where is she, our housekeeper? The daughter started fussing in the kitchen and replied, She went to the market in the morning. You know her, she always needs fresh groceries, and you know how much she likes to bargain. Eileen took a shower, had breakfast with her daughter, put on a fresh blouse and skirt, and waved bye to Kay before heading off to work. Her day was scheduled by the minute as always. After all, she had her own successful business. She owned a cargo transportation company. It was a small company with only 6 trucks, but the profits were good. However, it took Eileen years and years to achieve that. She had to start a business from scratch, establish a powerful logistics department, hire experienced managers and professional drivers, and most importantly, buy top-quality trucks so that everything worked properly. She had to control all the processes personally. Today, she thought she would come to work for just a couple of hours, but she had to deal with a lot of issues. It wasn't uncommon in her profession, anything could happen on the road. On the way home, Eileen stopped at a small cafe. It was always quiet and cozy, and most importantly, not crowded. The woman liked to just sit there in silence before diving into her household chores. She always ordered coffee and a creamy dessert and slowly enjoyed it, thinking about her life. For some reason, she thought about that old lady with the pendant. Eileen imagined the jewelry in detail, focused on it, and suddenly realized memories flashed through her mind. She was standing at the doorstep. It was raining outside, and she was holding her newborn daughter, who was crying nonstop. Her mother-in-law, Jill, looked out the window and, seeing her daughter-in-law, grimaced and opened the window. Why did you come here? I didn't invite you. What do you want? Eileen begged in tears, Jill, please shelter me and my daughter. We had to move out of our rented apartment because now we have no money to pay for it, and I have nowhere to go. I don't even have parents, I'm an orphan. After all, Kay is your granddaughter. I'm begging you, let us stay at your place for a little while, at least until I find some accommodation. Jill's husband, Stephen, looked out the window and was about to let his daughter-in-law into the apartment because she was standing there with the baby in her arms, soaking in the cold rain. But Jill suddenly started yelling like crazy, Get out of here. You took our son away from us, and now you want to get our house? Ralph died because of you. Solve your problems on your own. I don't want to see you here. I don't even know if she's my granddaughter. And the angry woman slammed the window shut loudly, signaling that the conversation was over. Eileen stayed there a little longer, hoping for mercy, but then walked away straight to the train station. There was nowhere else to go. This story had begun so sweetly. Eileen was flooded with memories again, and tears began to roll down her cheeks. She grew up in an orphanage. She was lucky. This orphanage was small and very nice, and the city mayor supported and supervised it. Therefore, no one was abused there. But still, the caretakers were strict, though the teachers were very professional. They taught children efficiently and often took them to the city to various exhibitions, the circus, and the cinema. There were even hobby clubs, cooking, soccer, cutting and sewing, foreign languages. Since childhood, Eileen had good math skills, and her memory was excellent. Her teachers praised her and awarded her with various prizes, and after graduation, they helped her to get into one of the best universities, the Faculty of Economics and Management. But when she met Ralph and moved into the room she was provided by the state as an orphan, she was not lucky. Her neighbors were always drinking, smoking, and having fun. It was very noisy there, and it was impossible to live and study. Therefore, like everyone else, she lived in a student dormitory and rented out her room to the same drinking man. After all, she needed some money to live on during her university years. At a student disco, she met Ralph. The guy couldn't take his eyes off her the whole night, invited her to slow dance, and showered her with compliments. When some drunken guys tried to harass her, Ralph immediately stood up for her and made it clear to everyone, "This is my girlfriend, is that clear? Or maybe someone wants to object. Come on, don't be shy, tell me." Ralph was a tough guy. He had been boxing since childhood, so no one risked messing with him. But Eileen appreciated such a noble deed. She was pleased that he called her his girlfriend. Since that night, the couple began dating. Both were madly in love with each other. Ralph also studied economics at the same university. He was the best student of the faculty, the pride of the university. The guy was smart and ambitious. While still a student, he had already tried to start his own small business repairing phones and laptops. His parents were well off. His father was a chief engineer at the local factory, and his mother was a boss. Their family lived in a big, beautiful house downtown. Ralph was a very attractive guy. Many girls liked him and tried to win his attention, but the guy loved his fiancée so much that he didn't even look at other girls. They whispered behind her back, "What a lucky orphan. She won such an attractive guy, but what did he find in her? She's just a simple girl, she doesn't even wear any makeup, doesn't wear any expensive outfits, and her body is nothing special." They were wrong because, for Ralph, Eileen was the most beautiful girl. He couldn't stop looking into her deep blue eyes, touching her wheat-colored curls, and murmuring words of love. He was so sick of arrogant, brazen girls who were ready to jump into bed on the first day. Their eyes were empty, and all they talked about was fancy clothes. Eileen was completely different. Soon, Ralph asked her to move into his rented apartment. He preferred not to live with his parents. Eileen kept wondering, why do you even need to spend money on renting an apartment? Your parents have a huge house, I don't understand, Ralph. But the guy always evasively answered, my mom is a very complicated person. I don't know how to explain, she loves me so much that she just suffocates me with her care, does not let me breathe. The girl replied dreamily, Ralph, you don't understand how happy you are. I would give anything for my parents to love me so much, but I'm alone. The boy hugged his beloved tightly. You are not alone anymore. Now you have me. I will be your protection and support. I love you, Eileen. Their rented apartment was always perfectly clean. The girl quickly learned to cook and often pleased her beloved with new recipes. She didn't succeed at everything on the first try, but she did everything with sincerity and love. The guy's intentions were serious, and soon he invited Eileen to his parents' house for dinner. The girl behaved modestly and respectfully, but despite this, she immediately felt a certain coldness and indifference from Ralph's parents, especially after she mentioned that she was an orphan. Ralph's mother, Jill, behaved especially rudely, always trying to offend the girl. She said many times that it wasn't clear what kind of genes Eileen had, and that she wanted grandchildren, but someone like Eileen couldn't give birth to smart and healthy children. She said that her son provided for her and fed her, but Eileen only used him. It hurt the girl very much. She often cried after such attacks from her future mother-in-law. Now she understood why her fiancé didn't want to live at home. It was impossible to tolerate. His mother was so jealous of her son that she would do anything to separate them. Eileen thought with horror, how could we create a family if his mother hated me so much? There was only one thing that comforted her, Ralph always stood up for her. He had stopped his mother abruptly more than once. Stop talking to Eileen like that. I'm ashamed of your behavior, Mom. We love each other, and we are going to get married anyway, whether you and Dad like it or not. My fiancé is my choice, so please respect my choice. Otherwise, you won't see me again. His father yelled, how dare you talk to your parents like that? Where are you going to get the money for the wedding? Do you think your miserable university grant will be enough for that? What are you going to live on? Your parents only wish you well and teach you how to live, but you're stubborn as a sheep and don't see anyone but your poor fiancée. I'm sure she's turning you against us. All the orphans are the same, cunning and sneaky. She smelled money, and now she won't miss it. The young couple got so sick of these constant quarrels that they really stopped communicating with Ralph's parents and decided to achieve everything on their own. The mother-in-law called from time to time, making hysterics and demanding that her son immediately break up with this fool and come back home. But Ralph was adamant. He realized he could not obey his mother. It was his own life, and she had no right to manipulate him. Eileen decided to sell her room, as it was impossible to live there anyway, and they invested the money in Ralph's new business. They rented an office, bought everything they needed to get started, and even had a modest wedding. It was so nice and fun. They had a barbecue, went swimming, sunbathed, and sang songs under the guitar by the fire. Then they kissed and loved each other until sunrise. It was so romantic, and they both remembered it as the best day of their lives. At first, family life was very difficult. They were always short of money and had to deny themselves everything. But the couple did not lose heart and only worked even harder. After graduation, Eileen worked as an accountant but secretly dreamed of starting her own business. However, there was no money for it. 3 years flew by like a day. The family lived peacefully, with almost no quarrels, and managed to buy a used car. Now Ralph was saving money for their own apartment. Moreover, he was offered a very promising position, the head of the sales department at a company specializing in rare industrial metals. They promised a very good salary and great career opportunities. The man decided to take a risk. He had high hopes for this business. So, he sold his small laptop repair business and invested the money in the shares of the company because the dividends were expected to be good. But Eileen was against it and tried her best to talk her husband out of it. Honey, maybe you shouldn't be in such a hurry. Why sell the repair shop? Try to work at the new place for a while, and then you'll decide whether it's worth it or not. But Ralph excitedly explained to her, Eileen, don't you understand? I have such a great chance to change everything in my life. I can't miss this chance. I've been dreaming of a job like this for a long time. I didn't go to university for nothing. I've calculated everything. We'll invest our money, and next year everything will pay off. We'll buy a nice apartment downtown and go on vacation abroad. Trust me, honey, I can sense a profitable business since university, you know. The woman was used to always supporting her husband, so she agreed with his decision, but her heart sensed trouble. It felt as if they were jumping off a cliff somewhere into the unknown. And soon, another important event happened. Eileen realized she was pregnant. When she brought home the ultrasound picture with a tiny, where the baby was, her husband almost jumped with joy. Ralph was beyond happy. He had always dreamed of having children and wanted a big family. He began to take care of and protect his beloved even more, worked even harder, often stayed late, went on endless business trips, and often didn't get enough sleep. The man wanted to show his best side, to be noticed by his bosses, to get promoted. But Eileen was very worried about her husband. She could see that he had taken on too much responsibility. Ralph looked worse and worse, lost a lot of weight, and had dark circles under his eyes from fatigue. She tried to tell him, "Stop, my love, please stop," but he didn't listen. Lately, he was gloomy all the time, thinking about something, but he didn't want to share his worries and only answered briefly, "Don't worry, sweetie, there's just a slight misunderstanding at work. Things will get better soon." "How is our little baby? Kicking in mommy's belly?" "Let me listen. I can't wait to see our baby. Just imagine how we'll walk with a stroller, kiss our baby." Unfortunately, Ralph was not destined to raise his baby. Nobody expected such a disaster to happen to their family. That evening, everything was as usual. Eileen was waiting for her husband from work, setting the table and doing household chores. She looked at the clock. Ralph should have been home hours ago. She kept waiting, but her husband wouldn't come. The woman became nervous and called him, but his phone was unavailable. Eileen rushed around the kitchen anxiously, even went outside a couple of times, and waited for him there. But it was already night, and her husband was still not home. Terrible thoughts were popping into her head. Where is he? Why is the phone unavailable? It has never happened before. What if something bad happened? I hope he'll come back soon. I'm so scared. But in the morning, the terrible call sounded like a gavel. Her beloved had died, and it was a ridiculously stupid death. His body was found that morning in one of the firm's underground parking garages. He started the car and, having fallen asleep from fatigue, died due to exhaust fumes. Eileen couldn't believe it. It's just not possible. Last morning, my husband kissed me before leaving for work, and today he is already gone? When Eileen came to the morgue to identify the body, she fainted a couple of times. She couldn't believe that the body they were showing her was Ralph. Eileen screamed wildly, "No, that's not my Ralph. He'll come home from work soon. I even made breakfast for him." "You're lying to me. Ralph couldn't die and leave me alone." "It's not true. They gave her a sedative." Everyone around felt compassion for the pregnant woman, but her mother-in-law blamed her for her son's death, shouting right at the funeral, "You killed him. My son died because of you. You drove him to the point that he worked without rest and fell asleep after barely getting into the car. Curse you. I curse the day you came into our lives." Eileen sobbed and covered her ears with her hands to avoid hearing the cursing. She whispered, "How can you say that? I loved Ralph. I'm carrying our baby under my heart. Why do you say such terrible things?" But Jill rushed to her daughter-in-law with fists and wanted to attack her. No one knows how it would have ended if people had not dragged her away in time. Eileen felt unwell. She felt a sharp pain in her back and abdomen and slowly sat down on the ground. The ambulance took her to the hospital from the cemetery. She spent 3 weeks in the hospital and almost lost her baby. Her mother-in-law never visited her in the hospital. Eileen was so hurt. It turned out that after the death of her husband, she had no one left at all. Her parents-in-law hated her and didn't even hide it. They didn't care what was happening to her and their granddaughter. So the woman didn't know where to look for help and compassion. When the widow returned home from the hospital, a new challenge awaited her. The first thing Eileen did was go to the investigator. She wanted to get to the truth. After all, her husband's death was very strange and suspicious. The forensics revealed that the driver's door had been locked from the outside, and they found no fingerprints at all on the ignition key of the company car, not even her husband's fingerprints. But how was that even possible if he got into the car and started it? Or who started the car? The woman hoped that while she was in the hospital, the investigation had already sorted everything out. But they told her indifferently that the case was closed, that it was an accident, and that there was no reason to suspect otherwise. Allegedly, the initial forensic examination was inaccurate. She argued and insisted on further investigation, but the investigators only said, "Dear lady, please don't scream here and calm down. In your situation, you should think about your baby, but you only go to the police every day. We are very sorry, it is terrible to lose a breadwinner, but everything is clear. Your husband was exhausted and fell asleep in the car. It happens." Eileen couldn't prove anything, so she had to accept it and learn to survive on her own. It is scary when you are alone, and no one cares about you, and you have a baby under your heart, so you're responsible for 2 lives at once. The money that had been saved by her husband was enough just for the funeral and childbirth. She had no idea what to do next. No one picked her up from the maternity hospital. It was so depressing because other women were waiting for their husbands, or at least some relatives and friends. Eileen looked around, hoping that her parents-in-law would come to their senses, but realizing that no one was waiting for her, the young mother slowly walked home to a rented apartment. But there were even worse trials awaiting her. While she was in the maternity hospital, she missed a payment and was almost out of money. The landlord was angry and told her to move out. He didn't like such troubled tenants with children. Eileen and her newborn daughter had to move out of the apartment, but she persuaded the landlord to leave her belongings there for now. He agreed because it would not prevent the new tenants from viewing the apartment, but he warned her that in a few days she should take all her stuff away, otherwise he would throw them in the dump. So the poor widow ended up on the doorstep of her mother-in-law's house. She didn't expect much, but she still hoped that Jill would see her granddaughter, show her mercy, and shelter her. After all, her house was huge, there was enough room for everyone. But the heart of the evil and cruel woman didn't flinch. She kicked out her daughter-in-law and, this time, cursed both of them, mother and her newborn baby. It was so hurtful and humiliating. It was impossible to understand how there could be so much hatred in one person. Eileen remembered the despair that struck her then. Where should she go with a baby? Where would she live? The woman had almost no money left, so she went to the train station and started walking on the platform. She was on the verge of madness, rocking her crying daughter and wiping her tears. The woman was in a panic. Where am I going to spend the night? What should I do with Haley? Maybe my daughter and I shouldn't live anymore. Who needs us in this cruel world? Without Ralph, we'll meet him there in heaven, and we'll be happy again, just like before. 2 hours passed. People were leaving and coming, but nobody paid any attention to the young mother. She was just waiting for something. Then an elderly lady selling mushrooms and berries on the platform called out to her, "Excuse me, miss, are you okay? Do you need any help? You don't look good. You've been here for hours, but you haven't gotten on any trains." Eileen jerked from surprise, came to her senses, sat down next to the old woman, and cried loudly. "I don't want to go anywhere. It seems my life is already over. My husband died. I have no money to pay the rent. I have a newborn baby in my arms, and when I wanted to ask my mother-in-law for help, she kicked me out. What should I do? Tell me, nobody needs me and my daughter. Why should I live then?" The old woman shook her head and began to pack up her goods, saying, "What on earth are you talking about, sweetheart? You can do what you want with yourself, but your baby is so innocent. Your baby deserves to live. I understand your grief. I lost someone close to me once and I know what it's like. But you can't give up. You have to fight, not for your own sake, but for the sake of the baby. You can always find a way out. You're still young, you have your whole life ahead of you. Don't even think about death." Eileen laughed hysterically. "The way out? It's a dead end. Should I become a bum now, sleep on the heating mains? I'd rather die than condemn my daughter to such a pathetic life. My mother-in-law hates me, but I'm okay with that. But it turned out that she didn't even need her granddaughter. I have nowhere to go, nowhere at all. I'm alone." The old woman saw that the girl was decent, well-dressed, and obviously not a thief or a swindler. She was just in trouble. Trouble can happen to anyone. Moreover, she was on the verge. She could decide to commit suicide any minute. And then the elderly lady said firmly, "Let's go to my place. I'm renting out a room in my house. It's small but clean and comfortable. I won't charge you much. I don't rent it out for money. I use the proceeds to help kids from the local orphanage. I still work there as a nurse because my pension payments are miserable. I understand what it's like to be an orphan. I've seen the broken destinies of so many poor kids. My name is Molly. On weekends, I sell goods here at the train station. What's your name and your daughter's name?" Eileen looked at her in surprise, unable to believe that this stranger was willing to shelter her without even knowing her name. She thanked her heartily. "My name is Eileen, and my daughter's name is Haley." "Thank you so much, Molly. I agree to any conditions. It's so scary to be out on the street, especially at night. You have no idea what you're doing for me now. You're saving my daughter's life. I'm really desperate." So, Eileen moved in with Molly, taking her belongings from the rented apartment. The room was small but very cozy and clean. The women immediately became friends, and over the years, they became almost a family. They made pastries together and had tea in the evening. The landlady was babysitting the baby while Eileen ran to the store. They rejoiced together at the girl's first tooth and her first step. When Haley was already walking confidently, she liked to run to Molly's arms and hug her. Haley considered Molly her own grandmother and loved her dearly, and it felt so warm on the lonely woman's soul. She looked at the little girl and said, "You are my dear prankster, my joy." Eventually, when the pain of loss had subsided, Eileen found the strength to open the box with Ralph's belongings, and what she found there shocked her. At first, she didn't even notice the dusty leather folder with some papers. She didn't care about any papers anymore. But then, remembering the strange and suspicious death of her husband, she pulled herself together and decided to read it. She couldn't believe her eyes. There was dirt on the managers of the company where her husband worked. It turned out that the managers were involved in criminal activity. They were stealing part of the cargo because rare industrial metals cost a fortune. The owner of the company obviously was not aware of these schemes, but her husband had found out. That's probably why he was killed. Eileen found a notebook with some incomprehensible notes and coordinates. Judging by the date at the bottom, the notes had been made the day before Ralph died. That's when Eileen realized why her husband was so gloomy before his death. He already realized that he was involved in criminal activity and that there was no way to get out of it safely. That's when he made the tragic decision to hide part of the cargo, marking it and encrypting it in his notes. But he didn't know that the criminals had been following him all this time. When they realized that some of the stolen cargo never reached its destination, they quickly got rid of Ralph. They even bribed the investigator so that he quickly closed the case and didn't even try to investigate anything. The woman did not hesitate and decided to take it all to the owner of the company, Patrick. She told him everything, gave him all the papers, and then quietly asked him, "I don't believe Ralph could fall asleep in the car. I'm sure he was killed by those bastards. I hope you will investigate everything and make sure the scoundrels are punished." The man looked at the grief-stricken young widow and promised, "Eileen, you can be sure I will punish everyone involved in this case. I didn't even know what was going on in my company. Thank you for your help. Ralph was a great guy and a talented professional. Sorry for your loss." Eileen cried, "I want justice more than anything else right now. They took away my beloved husband and the father of my daughter, and it's so scary." Patrick really started to investigate. He demanded that the police reopen the case, and the entire criminal syndicate from his company went to jail. Not only that, but those incomprehensible notes of Eileen's husband turned out to be the coordinates of a part of the cargo, which Ralph had managed to hide and said he was going to tell Patrick about, but they killed him. Patrick was very grateful to the widow and paid her a decent bonus, but Eileen was in no hurry to spend the money. She deposited it in the bank. The woman hoped that after the investigation was finished and the bastards were arrested, her mother-in-law would become kinder, would want to call her, or at least visit Haley. After all, she was her only granddaughter. But no, Jill still hated Eileen and didn't want to hear anything about her or Haley. It was killing her emotionally. She didn't understand why her mother-in-law hated her so much. Moreover, she even hated her granddaughter. Out of habit, the poor widow told Ralph everything, crying at his grave, but the wind was the only answer. Gradually, Eileen's life began to get better. Her daughter went to kindergarten, and the woman got a good job as an accountant for a trucking company. Since Molly was helping her with Haley, Eileen could now focus on her career. She decided to achieve everything on her own, to fight everyone. She would raise her daughter and give her the best education possible. Her daughter would not lack for anything. Soon, her hard work and diligence yielded results. In just a few years, she became the chief's assistant, and when he decided to move abroad with his family, he promoted Eileen to the head of the company. That's when the money that the woman had deposited in the bank a few years ago came in handy. She managed to buy half of the company, becoming its co-owner. The owner was confident in her honesty and business skills. She was able not only to stay afloat, but also to scale her business. She bought a 2-bedroom apartment downtown, as they had once dreamed with Ralph, learned to drive, and bought a comfortable car. The woman had long considered Molly to be her family member, so they still lived together. Haley was very smart and studied diligently. Last year, she graduated from high school and entered the medical university. The girl dreamed of becoming a doctor since she was a child. Eileen didn't even realize that she had already turned 43. She never got married again, and she could not fall in love with anyone after Ralph. He remained in her heart forever. Eileen put a beautiful monument on his grave, often went to the cemetery, sat on a bench near the fence, and told him everything. She believed that her beloved was there in heaven, listening to her, and that he was happy for her and their daughter. Also, Eileen took care of Molly. She always remembered who had saved her life, who had helped her in the most difficult moment. Years were taking their toll. The old woman was often sick and was already weak, but Eileen bought medicines and vitamins for Molly and paid for her checkups. In all these years, her mother-in-law never bothered to check on her granddaughter, never called to find out how they were doing. Eileen was deeply resentful and thought that Jill was heartless. Today, Eileen finally saw the old woman, that poor beggar at the pastry shop. That was definitely her mother-in-law. The woman's first thought was, "Oh, fate is so fair." Years ago, Jill didn't consider me a human being, reproached me for being an orphan, and now she's begging for bread. She deserves it. Maybe she'll finally realize how cruel she was to her family. Eileen was not used to keeping everything inside. She always shared everything with her family, and this unexpected meeting with her mother-in-law made her very emotional, bringing back unpleasant memories. The woman came home, and after dinner with her family, told them everything. Can you imagine? I didn't even recognize her. I was sure it was just some beggar, but the pendant caught my eye. It's her family pendant. She never parted with it. Jill is obviously poor, asking for money for bread. Am I supposed to feel sorry for her? No, I won't. She never had mercy on me. She only cursed me. If it wasn't for you, Molly, Haley, and I would be lost. You're my family, and I won't feel sorry for her. Haley asked cautiously, "So, you've met my grandmother?" Wow, I wonder what she's like. Do I look like her? How can I find her, Mom? I'd like to meet her. Suddenly, Eileen became angry. Why, darling? Tell me, why? There's nothing to talk to her about. She's hurt me so much. I'm certainly not going to look for her. Haley exclaimed, "Mom, but that's not right. You're the one who taught me to forgive and to try to help people. What about yourself? You don't have to make friends with her, but what if she really needs help?" Eileen fell silent. She expected her daughter to be on her side, but that's not what happened. Molly was silent for a long time and then said quietly, "I understand you better than anyone, and you're right about everything. But I want to tell you something. I'm not a saint either. I wasn't always lonely. I had a daughter, Vivian. I loved her dearly. We lived poorly, but she always wanted expensive toys, beautiful outfits, and a cool phone. When Vivian was 16, she started hanging out with a bad crowd, neglected her studies, and then started stealing everything from home to buy drugs. I was stupid and didn't realize what a disease it was, what a terrible addiction. I scolded my daughter, argued with her, and tried to talk sense to her. I was terribly ashamed that I had such a bad daughter. That day we had a fight. I cursed her too. I thought she was doing it to spite me, and then Vivian ran off to her friends, and I never saw her alive again. It turned out that Vivian overdosed that night. If you only knew how much I regretted all these years that I hadn't hugged her then, hadn't tried to help her, to understand her soul. But I had no idea it was the last time I'd see her. I don't know why I'm telling you this. It's up to you whether to talk to your mother-in-law or not. But I know for sure that everyone can make mistakes, and everyone deserves to be forgiven. But no matter what, a granddaughter has the right to see her grandmother. Eileen was up all night thinking about everything. The first thing she did in the morning was drive to that pastry shop again, hoping to see Jill. Why, she didn't know. Why? Just to look her in the eye, to talk to her. The woman waited for over an hour, but the old woman never showed up. Then Eileen went to her mother-in-law's old house and knocked, but some strangers opened the door and told her that the house had been sold long ago. They didn't know where the previous owners had gone. Eileen got worried. How could it be? Ralph's parents had such a nice house, and they loved it. Besides, they were very wealthy. What could have happened? Why had her mother-in-law become a beggar? For the entire next week, Eileen would come to the pastry shop every morning, hoping to see Jill again. Finally, she saw her. She looked closely, and it was her. Even though she had aged a lot, there was no trace of her former beauty and arrogance, and her eyes were full of hopelessness and despair. Eileen exhaled. Her heart was racing, but she had already made up her mind, so she boldly approached the old woman. "Hello, Jill. Do you recognize me?" The old woman looked at the business lady in surprise for a couple more seconds and then said, "Eileen, is that you? Jesus, how beautiful you are. You've changed so much. It's so wonderful that we've met, and I am. God, this is so hard for me to say. I wanted to apologize to you a long time ago, but I didn't dare. My guilt is killing me. It's burning me from the inside out. I was too late to realize that I ruined your life. Forgive me, girl." The old woman covered her face with her palms and cried quietly. It was sincere, real, and the ice in Eileen's soul melted. She believed in her mother-in-law's repentance and quietly asked, "Jill, where do you live now? I visited your house, but other people have been living there for a long time." Jill sadly replied, "It's a long and unhappy story, Eileen. If you want to come to my place, we can talk over tea. If you refuse, I'll understand too. I think you still hate me, but I understand why. It's my own fault." Eileen took her hand. "Here's my car. Tell me where to go." "Just wait a minute, I'll just get us some fresh pastries." When Jill took her daughter-in-law to the small room in the shabby dormitory, Eileen was horrified. She immediately thought of the room she got after the orphanage, the same drunken neighbors, the same stench and cockroaches. But the room itself was clean. Her mother-in-law kept it tidy. Jill made some tea, and they sat down at the table. Eileen put delicious pastries on a plate, and Jill couldn't resist eating them so greedily. It was obvious she was very hungry. At that moment, something turned upside down in Eileen's soul. She felt so sorry for this poor old woman. Jill sighed and began to tell her story. "You know, Stephen and I were always wealthy. I was used to a beautiful life, and I've never lacked anything. But after Ralph died, I went crazy. I really convinced myself that you were the reason he died. I couldn't believe in such a ridiculous death. When I kicked you out with my granddaughter, Stephen scolded me for a long time. We quarreled a lot. I wasn't myself. Stephen begged me to come to my senses, but it was like I was possessed by a demon. Hate was filling my mind because of the endless arguments and worries. Stephen began to get seriously ill. First, his heart began to fail, then the tests were bad, and then he was diagnosed with a terrible disease. It was very insidious and terrible. We had to sell the house because chemotherapy and surgeries cost a lot of money. That's why we moved into this room. We were fighting the disease for 5 years, but still, my husband died in my arms. He never forgave me that he lost his granddaughter, so I was left all alone. My pension payments are miserable. I don't even have enough for medicine and food. I can afford only the essentials: bread, milk, potatoes. Sometimes I don't even have enough money for that. You know, I don't want to live. Only after losing everyone, I gradually sobered up and realized what I had done. I pushed my son away from me, I abandoned my granddaughter, and I drove my husband to his grave with my behavior. I'm a monster. You know, Ralph often comes to me in my dreams. He looks at me reproachfully and keeps repeating the same thing: "Mom, how could you?" I feel so bad, so ashamed of everything. I confessed, and I feel a little better now. Eileen was shocked. It was as if she was talking not to her mother-in-law, but to a completely different woman, in whom there was no anger, no hatred. Even her eyes had changed. It was clear that her mother-in-law was sincerely sorry. Meanwhile, Jill asked timidly, "How is my granddaughter doing? What is her name?" "She's all grown up now." "Eileen, tell me a little about her. You are so beautiful. What are you doing in life? I suppose you're married." Eileen grimaced bitterly and told about her work, about Haley, and then added sadly, "And I never married again. I never fell out of love with Ralph. There's no room in my heart for anyone else. I often see him in my dreams too. He hugs me and kisses me tenderly. Now I live for my daughter. You know, Jill, probably if all the troubles had not fallen on me at once, and if you had not kicked me out, I would not have achieved anything in this life. Of course, Molly helped me a lot in the most difficult moment, and then, when everything normalized, I clenched my teeth and told myself that my daughter would never lack anything and I would fulfill all my dreams. After all, we have only one life, and we have to do everything in time. I was very mad at you, it's true. And even when I saw you near the pastry shop, honestly, I didn't even want to talk. But you know, my daughter turned out to be wiser than me and said that she really wanted to meet her grandmother. If you want, my daughter and I will come over tomorrow, and I'll introduce her to you." I thought about her words for a long time and realized that everyone can make mistakes, but everyone deserves a second chance. Even today, I wasn't sure our conversation would work out, but now I see that you are sincere and I believe you. After all, Jill, we are family. We need to forgive each other, to be friends and help each other, not fight. The women hugged each other. Jill cried and stroked her daughter-in-law's head. "Thank you, Eileen. Thank you for finding the strength and mercy to forgive the old wicked woman. You can't even imagine how much easier it made me feel, as if a huge stone was lifted from my soul. Of course, come to visit me any time. I'll be very happy. After all, I have no one but you and my granddaughter. Maybe we can start all over again, become family. I want that so much. It's so scary to be alone in old age." Eileen patted her on the shoulder. "Of course we can, Jill. We can start all over again." Strangely enough, after talking to her mother-in-law, Eileen also felt better. The resentment and anger suffocating her all those years began to subside, and harmony and tranquility replaced it. The next day, after work, she and Haley went to see Grandmother Jill, buying a bag of groceries and a big cake on the way. When Jill saw her beautiful granddaughter, she clapped her hands. "My God, my granddaughter, my sweet girl. You look just like your late father. You have Ralph's side, his cheekbones and hair are exactly the same. Let me hug you." "I'm sorry, Haley. I abandoned you. I didn't visit you at all. I was so wrong. Will you forgive your stupid grandmother?" Haley wiped her grandmother's tears and whispered, "Don't worry. I don't blame you at all. All your fights with Mom don't affect me in any way. You're my grandma. Do you have pictures of Daddy? Can I see them? I've never seen him, but my mom told me a lot about him. She still loves him very much." Jill fussed, opened an old cabinet, and pulled out a dusty album. She flipped through the pages excitedly and told her granddaughter, "Ralph is 1 year old in this picture. Isn't he cute? He's so chubby here. He loved to eat so much, and he never misbehaved. And this is a picture we took when he went to school." Haley laughed. "Such an important, serious daddy." "Oh, who's that?" Jill replied. "This is your late grandfather Stephen. Unfortunately, he's not with us anymore. And this is your parents getting married. My son left me this photo as a keepsake. You know, we weren't invited to the wedding, but it was our own fault." Jill cried bitterly again. She felt deeply ashamed. She had nothing to be proud of. She realized that she had brought only grief to her children. Haley understood her condition and comforted her. "Don't worry, Grandma. It's all in the past. Stop blaming yourself. Do you want to go to Daddy's grave together, the three of us? You'll be happy that we're together now, that you and Mom have made up. And I also want to introduce you to Grandma Molly. She's like a family member to me too. I love her very much. I think you'll become friends with her too. Don't cry, Grandma. You are not alone now, we are with you. The old lady admired her granddaughter, her wisdom, and her kindness. Haley, I am so grateful to your mom for raising you to be such a wonderful person. Now I am the happiest person in the world because I have you, and we will definitely go to visit his grave. All this time, I wanted only one thing, to repent in front of my son, to beg for forgiveness, but I didn't dare. Since that day, Haley took full patronage over her grandmother. She visited her almost every day and brought her goodies and gifts. As a future medical worker, she insisted on a full examination and help in treating her heart disease. Haley felt sorry that her granny had to live in such unbearable conditions. She couldn't even sleep normally because of the constant drinking and swearing of her neighbors, and it was scary to go out to the shared kitchen. So, the girl insisted that her grandmother move into their apartment. At first, Eileen was cautious about this news. The unpleasant moments of the past immediately came to her mind. The woman was anxious and didn't know if they could live under the same roof. But at the same time, she realized that her daughter was right and it was hard for Jill to live in such conditions at her age, so she agreed. Her fears were quickly dissolved. Her mother-in-law had changed a lot over the years, and she immediately made friends with her peers. They had a lot to talk about: knitting, cooking, and gardening. Gradually, Eileen also began to communicate warmly with her mother-in-law, talking to her heart to heart, not being afraid of any tricks from her side. Now a delicious dinner was waiting for her and Haley every evening. The grandmothers did their best, spoiling the family with pies and soups. The atmosphere in the family was warm and friendly. Jill, Eileen, and Haley often went to Ralph's grave, and every time the old mother cried, hugging his photo, repenting and begging for forgiveness. But she was endlessly happy that now she had such a friendly family where everyone sincerely loved each other. Finally, her son heard her and forgave her. Jill had a wonderful dream. Ralph didn't blame her as before, but smiled warmly and said, "Thank you, Mom. Now I am calm." The woman woke up with a smile and immediately realized it was a sign. Ralph was no longer angry with her, her son had forgiven her. Now she felt peace in her soul, and she was proud of her daughter-in-law and her granddaughter. She wanted to devote the rest of her life only to them. Soon, at the family council, they decided to sell Jill's room in Molly's house, which had been empty for many years, add some money, and buy a big, beautiful mansion. They decided to keep the apartment for Haley. When everyone moved into the new mansion, there was no limit to their happiness. It was so spacious and comfortable. They got a big dog named Richie, and Haley found a funny kitten named Tom and enjoyed taking care of the pets. The seniors enjoyed planting roses in the garden and even made a small vegetable garden. They were so excited about it that even ridiculous worries seemed to go away, and their strength increased. Eileen now loved to relax in the gazebo after a hard-working day, wrapping herself in a warm blanket and just enjoying the peace and quiet. All the woman dreamed of was that her dear daughter would be happy and that her beloved grandmothers would be around for as long as possible. There was peace in her heart now. She often thought how happy Ralph would be to see that the whole family was living together without quarrels. It often happens in families that the closest and dearest people become enemies and hate each other, making life terrible. But for harmony in the family, you only need to make the first step, to realize your mistakes and try to fix the relationship. It is important to be able to forgive, ask for forgiveness, and not judge each other harshly. Fortunately, our characters have found the strength to fix everything.